What is a red flag from an employer that people might not immediately recognize as a red flag? Story number 1. Having to take an online IQ test before even being considered for an interview. Backstory: when I moved to Australia, I was looking for work as a language teacher. I went on the Monster website and found an advert saying that they were looking for teachers for gifted children, but that I needed to take an online IQ test to apply, needed an IQ above 125 to go for an interview. I took the test, sent in my CV and cover letter, and waited. An hour later I get an email asking to meet at a special cafe in downtown Melbourne the following day. So I go and notice that this building was a Freemason building and that one needed a special pass to get in. There was a little older lady waiting for me in a tacky floral print shirt and a white fisherman's hat. Immediately, she pardoned herself for wearing that hat, explaining that it was lined with aluminum to protect her from the cell phone radiation. I think nothing of it and order a coffee. Off the bat, the old lady tells me about how she has an IQ of 160 and the rarest blood type, similar to that of Tutankhamun. She goes on and on about this for a while and then begins explaining the job. She tells me that in the beginning, I wouldn't be teaching but administering tests in schools around Queensland to recruit children to special camps, where then I would be teaching. The whole thing screamed red flags, but I politely listened and got her business card if ever I had further questions. I got a proposal on the spot. I looked at the card and it said the wise ones. After looking it up, I noticed that it was a cult, similar to that of universal medicine. Story number 2. When an employee quits or gets fired from the job and the company doesn't hire anyone new to replace them. It can be hard to tell as a red flag at first, but the temporary workload they added to your own over that was left over after the person left slowly becomes your new permanent workload, without any changes to your pay or benefits to compensate for the additional tasks. The further out it goes without the position being filled, the larger and more obvious the red flag becomes. Story number 3. The CEO boss whatever drives a conspicuously expensive car. I can elaborate why this is a tell if anyone cares. If it's a private family company, do a Google search for company name, defendant, and company name, plaintiff. If the company has been sued or is in the habit of suing others, that can be a red flag, although something there are legit reasons for either. But it's something worth paying attention to. If when you are asked to come in for an interview, you are not treated with total respect for your time, for example, if you find yourself waiting for extended periods for an interview because so and so is in a really important meeting. Similarly, if you are not offered at least water and or coffee if you're in for several interviews. I once interviewed at a place for 7 straight hours with no break, no food, not even a glass of water. Fortunately, I wasn't offered the job as it was at Michael Milken's firm, before he went to prison. If the company brings alcohol into the office for end-of-week sessions on a regular basis, I know they can be fun, but it's a stupendously bad idea for all kinds of reasons, and if leadership hasn't figured that out, then I would think twice before joining. If when you're visiting the company for the first time and you pass someone in a hallway, do they smile and acknowledge your presence with a nod or maybe a hello? Or do they ignore you? It's a small thing but very telling about the workplace culture. Similarly, do people seem healthy and energized or gray-faced and tired? Any bait and switch deviations from representations made during the recruiting process versus actual terms conditions. If it's a job in a manufacturing or distribution facility, is it messy or tidy? Messy, cluttered facilities are indicative of poor management. Plus, they can be dangerous. As others have noted, any BS about people like to work late or stuff like that used as pressure to get you to put in extra hours. Last, pay attention to your gut feel. If something feels off, it probably is. About the cars, there are obviously exceptions, but in my experience, leaders who are focused on the external indicators of their personal success will orient their behavior and decisions towards their own benefit versus benefiting the entire company and or other employees. In more extreme cases, which unfortunately are not uncommon, these people tend towards the narcissistic personality type, which means they will tend to set their direct reports against each other rather than encouraging and fostering collaboration and display other behaviors that make for a miserable workplace. I know, kind of a big leap from a fancy car, but I've been at this for almost 40 years and it's amazing how patterns tend to repeat. And for clarity, I'm really talking about conspicuously expensive, not a nice Mercedes or whatever, but a Bentley, Ferrari, that sort of thing. Story number 4. Anything that the manager says in the interview that doesn't line up with the job description. Yeah, we posted it's a manager level position, but this is actually a coordinator role. Yeah, the description says travel is 25%, but it might be closer to 50%, it just depends. We did post it as a remote job, but we prefer people to be in the office X days a week. Yeah, we phrase it that way in the job description because corporate says we have to. All of those are red flags. Anything a company is vague about should be a red flag. Next story. Interviewed with a regional VP of a billion-dollar company for a sales role. When I asked if the position was a backfill or open due to growth, he stated a backfill. I asked if the person was promoted or moved to a new role, And his response was, "We have had more people quit in 2021 than ever. And it's because they can't handle the pressure." Needless to say, I declined the next step in the hiring process. Next story. Trying to rush a decision out of you once the offer is made. I once interviewed with a company where I would have been relocating across the country to work for them. There were 3 rounds of interviews and they left me completely in the dark for weeks on end between each round before inviting me to the next round within just a few days of when the interview would take place. After the final interview, it was over a month of silence from them until they made an offer but told me I had less than 24 hours to let them know my decision. I would have been moving 2,000 miles away from home to a place I had never been or even seen before. Interviews were completely virtual. They wanted me to start 6 days after the offer had been made. When I asked if there was any flexibility for me to have more time to think it over or have more time to move out there, they said no. They needed the decision the next day, and if I accepted, I would be starting in less than a week. I declined the offer. Next story. I always ask the question, why is this role open? Is it a new role? Or am I replacing someone? Why did that person leave? This really helps you seeing their reaction, and if they look nervous, it's because the person who left did it because they were not happy. I also like asking how senior my team members are. If there's new there more than 2 years, I would also be concerned. Final question. As I work in sales, I always ask what's the KPIs and how many are actually hitting their quarterly and annual target. This also reveals if they set their targets too high, and you can expect to enter a grim working culture where you're never good enough and can always do better. Last one. I like asking about how they are working to establish a team culture as well, since this will tell you a lot if people at work are friends or just there to do their job. 8th story. The sink or swim technique. It was my first day as a cashier. I got a couple of hours of training, then I was by myself, and we were dead. All of a sudden this rush came in and I was asking for help. The manager goes, "Sink or swim, we're busy back here, figure it out." LOL, I did, but let me tell you, customers were not happy because I still didn't know how to properly enter in orders, especially modifications. 9th story. Asking if you are somebody who's willing to put in the time to make sure deadlines are met, work is done, or if you're the type of person who leaves when the workday is finished. This is generally corporate speak, for we will be forcing you to work unpaid overtime. Story number 10. I interviewed once at a very huge organization that had a site in the town I was living in. And these guys were so proud of the new top-of-the-line facilities. When they took me on a tour, they pointed out the lovely Zen garden area that was made for employees to go unwind and clear their heads. The problem with it was this area was positioned directly across from all the higher-ups' offices. Yeah, no. Story number 11. I went on an interview. They had me wait in the lobby. In the 5 minutes I was sitting there, 3 employees walked past me. The first just looked at me and laughed. The second said, "Leave. Leave while you can." The third made the sign of the cross at me. Later, during the interview, the hiring manager showed me the Zen room, which was a quiet room you got to go to for 10 minutes when you got too stressed out. I was offered the job. I declined. Next story. From personal experience coming out of college, mechanical engineering degree. This was hands down red flag galore. This was my second real engineering job interview, so I told myself see it through because I need the interviewing experience. And they reached out to me for an entry-level design engineering position. They made me wait for 15 minutes in a not-heated breezeway in the middle of winter. A receptionist came out 5 minutes into me waiting in the cold and asked would I need to give a 2-week notice to my current job or can I start this week. I gave a non-answer and I thought that was also my invitation in, and she said that the person was not ready yet and I had to continue to wait. When I finally was greeted by the manager I would work under, he was new to the company, 2 months at the time. He made sure I knew that for some reason. They first asked a standard "tell me about yourself," then pivoted to pay, saying, "Look, I understand what you might expect in terms of compensation, but please hear us out before you make your decision." Weird, that was not something I mentioned in my get to know me pitch. We do a quick tour, and by quick I meant 2 minutes. No workers looked up from their areas as we passed through, and you could hear a pin drop, it was that silent. Next, the place is old. Inside the work area everything looked like it was bought in the 80s. The manager casually drops, "So when you first pull into the office, leave your cell phone in your car because having it go off at your desk is grounds for termination. If something is that important, give your family the number for the receptionist, and they can forward a call to you if you are not busy. Anyway, follow me, the owner wants to meet with you." The owner is in his 70s and the son of the founder of the company. His personal story was nice, but after the get to know you stuff, no technical questions, he slides a folder across the table and says, "Quit your job today, start tomorrow, and I'll give you $2,000. Inside is a breakdown of their policies, 2 highlights. Doctor's visits and funerals are unexcused absences unless you take vacation for them. You are not allowed to be more than 15 minutes late twice in a calendar year, or you are subject to termination, and pay." The amount for salary was blank, so I asked about it. He stares down the manager, who looks like he saw a ghost at this point, and asks, "What do you think is fair?" I asked for a book market rate for pay given my education and the position, and they countered with a significantly lower number, more than 25K per year less than my book market value ask, saying, "We are glad to pay you that amount at a later date, but you need to go through training and onboarding. While doing that, you aren't actually doing all the responsibilities of this role, and onboarding takes 6 months, so we can negotiate a more reasonable salary then, but for now this is our offer." I said, "I understand there are costs for training, but what does that entail to justify the pay?" He said, "To learn the company you need to start from the bottom. Your first 6 months you'll be in the warehouse loading and unloading product from semi-trailers." I thought he was joking. He was not. I immediately said, "Thank you, I need to think this over," and walked to the door. The owner half blocks the door and says, "If you leave now you're ruining your future. You don't understand, this opportunity will set you up for life if you're willing to make sacrifices." I say, "I'll call you tomorrow," and leave. This entire process lasted 45 minutes on a first interview. I get home and have an email from the owner saying, "How dare I leave the interview? If I had any level of experience they'd start me closer to my desired pay. I am making the worst decision of my life by not taking this job," etc. I get a phone call about an hour later from the manager saying, "Look, I understand you may have reservations, but if you come in tomorrow I can give you another $500. I hung up and that was that. This place tried to get me, a recent engineering grad, to take a warehouse job that was pitched as the training program to become an engineer at nearly half the book market rate for an engineer out of college. One that said they'd fire you for having a cell phone in the building, and that God forbid you have to go to a funeral, you need to take a vacation day. So what is a red flag? You might not realize literally anything I just said. Let's get to the next story. I once had an interview with a company scheduled at 3. Company door was locked for safety of clients, so I stood out there for around 5 minutes knocking and calling the office number. The person who was supposed to interview me finally came out and told me they were heading home for the day and that they would call me the next day. The next day they called and offered me the job, and like an idiot I accepted it. That level of unprofessionalism was only a soft start to what really went down in that company. During my less than 5 months working there, 6 of my coworkers quit. When I finally quit and had to sign paperwork, my manager told me their office hours were from 8 to 6 that day. I came to the office at 4 knowing it should not be a busy time. They were already gone for the day. So essentially management did not keep to their schedule, and they were always hiring due to their crazy turnover rate. Let's get to the next story. Any job ad that doesn't mention the name of the company should raise suspicions, doubly so if it's anything to do with sales. Got done by that trick once. Turned up to the interview and the job was going door to door selling vacuums for Kirby Vacuums. Next story. Had an interview somewhere, they offered 20 to 23 starting. Being new in this field, when they asked how much I was expecting to be paid, I said, "Well, you guys are offering 20 to 23 starting, and being new in the field I think 20 would be good." Their response was, "Oh, well, that's kind of a red flag for us. Usually when someone starts with us they'll say, 'I'll take $17 until I can prove to you that I'm worth the $20, so you'll see why we're hesitant." My response then, "Why would you offer $20 at your low end?" I didn't get a call back. Next story. Referring to the company as family. Employers are not your family. Family can't fire you. Saying you are work fam or anything else is a guilt trip to make you leave your real family and work extra hours for no pay. My company does this and it grosses me out. It works on our young hires, but the older ones roll their eyes. Oh, and saying, "This isn't your typical 9 to 5. Also companies that have a cult following and make up their own words. Run, just run. Story number 17. In software development, any take-home interview assignment that can't be finished in under 4 hours. Some shadier companies have been caught outsourcing labor for free this way. But even in the much less nefarious scenario where it really is just an evaluation, if a company has so little respect for your work-life balance that they're going to require a day's worth of unpaid labor just to interview, they're probably not going to respect it if they hire you either. Also, too much emphasis on how great their office amenities are often means they expect you to not leave the office. Usually the sweet spot is a decent snack selection, and maybe a gym in the building if it's a shared office building. One foosball table or something isn't necessarily a red flag, but odds are nobody uses it. Next story. They get visibly and vocally freaked out when you tell them you have no social media. The follow-up question of everyone does, "You have to," had made me walk out. A company that wants access to my personal family-only social media platforms is not a company I want to work for. I separate my personal and professional life. They have no business knowing about me or my family and anything going on therein. They do not need access to your Facebook, and should they gain it through another employee or other means, I would sue the freaking crap out of them for violating my right to privacy. Let's get to the next story. During the interview process, I asked what industry conferences did they attend the previous year. The hiring manager responded, "Our project schedule did not allow us to attend any conference the previous year." There was another individual in the room and just laughed and blurted out we have never gone to any events ever. During the same interview I got to tour their data center, and it was basically filled with legacy junk. The one flag was all I needed. I got two. Hey, thanks for subscribing and liking, it really means a lot to me. While you are here, feel free to hop on over to the last video. See you there. Ronnie.